Today I'm going to be talking about circumference and arc length. This is chapter 11, section 1. What we're going to start out with is just the basic circumference formula. C equals 2 times pi times r, and r is our radius. So the first question asks, find the circumference of a circle with a radius of 6 centimeters. So what we start off with is we write our formula. C equals 2 pi r. Well, they gave us the radius, so we're going to plug the 6 into where the r is. So it's 2 times pi times 6. And we can use our calculators. We can do 2 times pi, which is second caret, times 6, and we can get our answer, which is about 37.7. And we have to be really careful about our units, so that is in centimeters. Okay? Our next one, we're finding the radius of a circle, and I give you the circumference, which is 31 meters. So once again, I'm going to write down the formula. But this time, I give you the circumference, which is 31. So we're going to put that in where the C is. And then we're going to find the radius. Now, to find the radius, we divide by 2 pi on both sides. Now, we have to be really careful when we put this into the calculator, because when we do 2 pi, we have to put parentheses around those. So I'm going to show you that in the calculator. So we do 31 divided by parentheses 2 pi. If we do not put the parentheses in the denominator, we will get the incorrect answer. So that's going to be 4.9. So the radius is about 4.9. Don't forget your units, meters. Okay? We have a couple more questions using the circumference formula. This time we're finding the diameter of a circle with a circumference of 17 feet. So we can use the formula C equals 2 pi r. Okay, and they give us circumference, which is 17. So we plug in 17 for C. 2 pi r. So we can solve for r, which is dividing by 2 pi. And don't forget your parentheses around the 2 pi. So let's do that in our calculators. 17 divided by parentheses 2 pi. And we get about 2.7. So now our radius is 2.7, but I asked you to find the diameter. And we find the diameter if we have, let's say, a radius of 5, the diameter is going to be 10. So we multiply by 2. So the diameter for this one is going to be about 5.4 feet. Okay? Now, the very last one, I asked you to find the exact circumference of a circle with a diameter of 8 inches. Exact is our word here that we need to focus on. Okay? Now, exact means that I don't have a decimal, I don't have any rounding, nothing like that. A way we say exact is in terms of pi. That means we're not going to touch pi, we're not going to put it in the calculator and round, we're going to keep it in our answer. So we're finding the circumference, so it's 2 pi r. If our diameter is 8 inches, our radius is 4, because remember radius is half. So our radius is going to be 4. So let's plug that in. C equals 2 pi 4. We're not going to use pi in our calculator, so we just multiply the 2 and the 4, and we get 8 pi inches. That is what we call exact, or in terms of pi. No rounded decimals. All right, next up, we're going to be looking at 2 different terms, arc measure and arc length. We've already seen arc measure before. When we have a central angle, its arc is equal. An arc measure is always in degrees, so we have to keep that in mind. Arc measure is in degrees. We have something new called arc length, and length is in linear units like feet, inches, meters, or centimeters. So if we look at arc AB, the length, if we were to measure it with a ruler, would be about 2.6 inches. So that's the difference between measure and length. Okay, and to find length, we have a formula or a proportion that we use. And that's arc length of AB over 2 pi r equals measure of arc AB equals 360 degrees. It's like part over a whole equals part over a whole. The length is part of the circle, 2 pi r is the circumference, the whole thing. The measure of the arc is part of the circle, 360 is the entire degree of a circle. So that's how we can use that proportion, okay? Every time we use a proportion, we're going to write it down. So the first one asks us to find the length of arc AB. So I'm going to write this formula or proportion down. So I use cursive L for length. So length of AB over 2 pi r is equal to the measure of arc AB over 360. Once I write down my proportion, I can start filling things in. Since I'm finding the length of AB, I'm going to put an X in for that. Now we plug in for the radius. We do 2 times pi times the radius, which in this case, in this circle, is 5 feet. Then we do the measure of arc AB, which remember measure is in degrees, so that's 50 degrees over 360. Okay, we now cross multiply and solve. 360 times x is 360x. And then when you cross multiply for this one, to make things a little bit easier, I'm going to multiply all the whole numbers together. 2 times 5 times 50, which is 500. And then we're going to put the pi at the very end. It just makes it easier to put the pi at the very end and to calculate that in your calculator at the end. So the very last piece is to solve for x. We divide by 360. We put this into our calculator as 500 pi divided by 360, which is going to be about 4.4 feet. Since its length, this unit is in feet. Okay. Next one, once again, we're finding the length of the arc. So I'm going to write down my formula. Length of arc CD over 2 pi r equals the measure of arc CD over 360. We're finding the length, so we can plug in x for that. Then we have 2 times pi times the radius. Well, the diameter here is 14, so the radius is 7. And then the measure is 100 over 360. Cross multiply and solve. I get 360x equals 2 times 7 times 100, which is 1400. And don't forget your pi at the end. Last piece to solve for x, we divide by 360. We're going to plug that into our calculator. So we have 1400 pi divided by 360, and we get 12.2 centimeters. And it's centimeters because it is length. Let's try a couple more problems. This one we're finding the radius. This is a little bit different. And we're looking for the radius, but I give you the arc length and the arc measure. So we can still use our proportion. The length of arc AB all over all over 2 pi r equals the measure of arc AB over 360. So let's start plugging in what we know. We know that the length is 3.82. We leave 2 pi and r because we're looking for r. We're going to solve for r. The measure of AB is 60 over 360. So let's cross multiply and solve. When we cross multiply, 60 times 2 is 120. Don't forget your pi and your r at the end. Equals 3.82 times 360, which is 1,375.2 2. To solve for r, we can divide by 120 pi, but do not forget when we're dividing, we have to have parentheses around that denominator. So I'm going to plug that into my calculator. 1,375.2 divided by parentheses 120 pi, close parentheses, and I get a radius of about 3.6 meters. Don't forget your units as well. Okay, next up, I'm going to be looking for the measure of the arc. Remember the degrees. We can still use our proportion. So I'm going to write down my proportion, the length of arc CD over 2 pi r equals the measure of arc CD over 360. The length in this case is 18. 2 times pi times the radius, which is 7.64, equals the measure, but we don't know the measure, so we're going to put an x over 360. We're going to multiply 2 and 7, 2 times 7.64, which is 15.28. Don't forget your pi and your x. Then we're going to do 360 times 18, which is 6480. Our next step is to divide by 15.28 pi. Do not forget those parentheses in the denominator. So x will equal 6,480 divided by parentheses 15.28 pi, close parentheses, and we get about 135 degrees. We're looking for the measure, so this is in degrees. Be very careful with that unit on that one. All right, we have one more example, and this time we are looking for the circumference. Okay, now there's circumference formula, so we're looking to find the circumference, and the formula for circumference is c equals 2 pi r. But to find the circumference using this formula, we have to have the radius. And in this circle, we do not have that radius, but we do have the arc measure and the arc length. So I can use that formula. The length of arc AB over 2 pi r is equal to the measure of arc AB over 360. Now, I'm going to point something out that's very interesting. 2 pi r and 2 pi r are both in these formulas, and 2 pi r is equal to the circumference. So if you're looking for the circumference, we can do a shortcut and rewrite this formula as the length of arc AB over c for circumference, because circumference is equal to 2 pi r, which equals the measure of arc AB over 360. Now this actually becomes so much more simple, and all we have to do is plug in. Our length is 3.82. C for circumference, our measure is 60 divided by 360. I'm going to cross multiply and solve. 60C is equal to 1,375.2. I'm going to divide by 60, and our circumference is 1,375.2 divided by 60, which gives us about 22.9, and in this case it is meters.